Scott.
You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
You ever find yourself in a situation where you can trace all of the steps that led to that situation, and you still cannot figure out how to get out of that situation? It can be an interesting paradox of free choice, predestination, and dead ends, where you just have to resolve your, give you an example. This stupid example. Like going to somebody's wedding. You know, you gotta go. And I actually enjoy going to weddings, so in my case, it's a bad example. I've been to multiple weddings of my friends, and I'm shocked that I actually haven't gone to more. I thought more of my friends would get married. Now, they did get married, but, you know, some of them went out of state. Some have decided not to have ceremonies. Some have had smaller ceremonies that they didn't invite a lot of people to. But the idea of you just resign yourself like, I am obligated to do this. And that happened to me over the summer, where in an offhand remark, I committed to doing something, and then when the time came, what I was supposed to be doing was very involved, and you just can't get out of it. You're just stuck. And out of an obligation and professionalism, I continued with it, and I did this task that I was asked to do, and I was paid. I'm not, it's not like it was something I did for free, or, I'm giving my time. No, they paid me quite well for the work that it was. But I did find myself almost trapped in an area where that's unusual in modern day, to find yourself, and as you can tell, I'm driving in the car. It's unusual to find yourself out in the world, trapped in an area. Like, I used to do extra work in the movies, and they would park your car somewhere, and then they would shuttle you to the movie set. Now, this was in the mid-90s, so there's no cell phones, nothing like that. You would take a book or a writing pad, and you would resign yourself to the idea that I'm going to be here probably 10 hours. And taking your car away meant you couldn't leave. And I did that on a number of movie sets, the last one being Ed Wood, where they kept us about 14 hours. And I finally said, as much as I love being around movie productions and seeing directors and actors that I admire, this is mind-numbing. And again, they were paying well for it, so it's not like it was done for free. Now, I just say that because I need you to get the idea of the isolation of this thing that I did. But I ended up at a place called Camp Josepho. Now, Camp Josepho is a Boy Scout camp up in the Pacific Palisades. And it's weird because it was founded a long time ago, 100 years ago. So when they founded it, there was nothing around. And now, as you can guess, here in California, the Palisades is where very rich people live. So the Boy Scouts have kept their tight control of Camp Josepho all these years, and it truly was a beautiful, just amazing place. But getting there was unusual. I was on a van you would take to the airport, and we drove through these neighborhoods full of gazillion-dollar houses. And then we went up to a top neighborhood where the houses were, what's the word above gazillion? Gatrillion? $1 quadrillion. These were mega houses. And I made a comment to myself of, well, how do these people buy groceries? Because it was quite a drive up into this upscale neighborhood. And then I thought, I'm an idiot. They have people who do that. They have people who shop for them. They don't run out to Target the way I do when we're out of buns. They have people who make sure that they never run out of buns. So it was interesting being in such an isolated neighborhood with houses that were so expensive. And Camp Josepho's entrance, you drive up to this peak where the houses look like spaceships. And there's actually a guy who sits in a little chair to make sure that you have clearance to go through Camp Josepho. Because if you don't, what are you doing in this neighborhood? And he waves you, he checks your credentials, the driver, and they wave you into this little gate that looks as if it goes nowhere. And it actually goes somewhere. It goes to this what I would consider like a jogging trail or a hiking trail for adventurous, rich people who run with their dogs and time their caloric burning. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's people. I just don't have time for that. I would love to take care of myself. And, Jeff, you should take time to take care of yourself. Yes, I know, inner voice. Thank you. And thankfully, my inner voice is not Don Berg. Oh, Don, you have to call yourself, Jeffrey. Thank you, Mr. Berg. But you turn onto this rocky road, and it's pretty expansive. It's a nice road with rock on one side, and you can see the road on the other side, and you take that for about 15 minutes, and that's quite a drive, 15 minutes of just bouncing along a rock trail. And that's when the joggers and the hikers and the people running with their dogs dry up, because you're about to head into a more isolated road. And then it becomes, I'm not kidding, a one-lane road that zigzags down a mountain for an hour. And it's mind-numbingly boring. The first time I went down, I was stunned at how long it took. The other thing is that about halfway down, there's no cell service. So your phone just goes dead. You don't get any notifications. You can't get a signal. You can do nothing with it. So you resign yourself. And in modern life, really take a moment one day and see how many times you check your phone. You check it to check the time. You look at it. You put it back in your pocket. You realize you didn't check the time. So you bring it back out to actually check the time. And that's, rinse, repeat. So the first time I went down, the phone just dies. And the phone is dead. Oh, well, that's weird. So then it's an hour drive, single road down to Camp Josepho. Back and forth. And it's rock wall and drop. Rock wall and drop. You ever seen pictures from Brazil where these rickety tour buses are going down into the jungle, and there's all these people on a bus, and you're like, the driver's going to just drive off the cliff. That's kind of what it felt like to me. It was very surreal, to say the least. But you finally get to the bottom, and it's a sign that says, welcome to Camp Josepho, and, established in whatever. And it's a beautiful little camp. They have cabins. They have a main hall. They had a pool with a pool house with changing rooms for men and women, and little auxiliary buildings and cabins. And there's a main caretaker's house where a guy lives there. He just lives there. He has a satellite dish and a little garden, and I'm sure he makes his trek up to the top of Camp Josepho once a week for supplies. But he was on his porch most of the time, sipping tea, staring at us, and I just looked at that guy and I thought, this guy lives in California, in the Pacific Palisades, in a billion-dollar neighborhood, and he's just kicking back, watching camp. What a gig, right? What a gig. The main hall was gorgeous, probably built in the 20s, with all the amenities that the 20s would offer, with barracks up top and a full-service kitchen downstairs and a giant hall with Boy Scout murals on the wall. And it was really beautiful, but it was also very lonely because I wasn't there with friends. There were people there, people that I knew, but I wasn't really like overly friendly. And even, there was a couple of people that I knew pretty well, but we had a job to do. So there wasn't any like hanging out or who's doing this or that. It was, we have a job to do and we have to get to it, which, I've done projects, big projects, so I totally get all that. And I had made a commitment, but there was some downtime. And in that downtime, I just had a moment, because this is a lot like when I went to Galaxy's Edge and I had to put my phone in a bag. There is a weird modern day thing that happens when you are forced to disconnect from your phone. There's no internet, no Google, no notifications that somebody liked your post, no eBay notifications that somebody made an offer, nothing. And you just are living in the moment. And I was living in these stark moments at Camp Josepho, in between working, and just marveling at what it must have been like years ago for the campers to take the trek down to Camp Josepho. And I wondered, how did they get all the scouts down there? Of course, I realized, because I'm stupid, that they hiked down. It's probably a 3-hour hike down from the top to Camp Josepho. I looked up some videos on YouTube, and it showed the campers, the scouts, living in actual pup tents. Part of Camp Josepho was setting up your own tent and living there and learning about nature and, learning knots and archery and swimming and hiking trails and animal prints and all the things that scouts do. Now, I was a Cub Scout for a while, so I had just a little tiny twinge of connection to the ghosts of Camp Josepho. And walking around, it was a really interesting moment to be able to be cut off and living in nature, again, with a job to do, but there was some downtime, and it really made me harken back to the times when I was young and I went to camp, and I really enjoyed going to camp. Now, what was waiting for me at home. This is during the time of the drunks. So, to escape the drunks, my mother begged the church that we went to, Christ United Methodist, to send me to church camp. And I went 3 times. I went once during the summer to Camp Wrightwood, once during Easter to Camp Wrightwood, and once during the summer to Camp Lazy W. Lazy W was a lot of fun. It had a big mess hall. It had a little creek. Everybody stayed in cabins. We were so broke in this moment in time that, and of course, again, as a kid, you have no idea how poor you are. You just know this is life. This is what we do. We just know that a loaf of bread is a hot dog bun, a hamburger bun, and garlic bread. And toast, right? So, going to camp was a big deal because, unlike at home, everything at camp was structured. You got up, you did this, you went to breakfast, you did this activity, lunch, this activity, dinner, this activity, bedtime. Once again, the next day you do it all over again. So part of me, the straight A school student, really, really meshed nicely with the structure of camp. We couldn't afford a flashlight for me. They send you a list of what you're supposed to take to camp, and like top of the list is a flashlight. You're supposed to take a flashlight to camp so that you can not get lost at night. You can get from your cabin to wherever you need to go in the middle of the night, because it's pitch black. Now, again, I don't know why we couldn't afford a flashlight, what happened, but my mother sent me with this portable fluorescent light. It had a fluorescent tube. You clicked it on, and it sort of took a second to go zing, and then it turned on. So at camp, all the kids are using their flashlights as lightsabers. You throw dust in the air, turn it on, and instant lightsaber, just like in Hardware Wars. Golly jeepers, wow. And there I am with my fluorescent flashlight. It's not even a flashlight. Fluorescent camp light that takes 8D batteries. So you can imagine what it weighed. But this is what I had. This is what I was given. So that was Lazy W. I really enjoyed Wrightwood more, and probably only because I went there twice. Lazy W I only went once, but Camp Wrightwood I went twice. The first time I went to Camp Wrightwood in the summer, it was so different than my home life, and different in my home life and my school life, because you get to be whoever you want to be at camp, because nobody there knows you, and you get to assume whatever persona. Now, I wasn't good at creating personas, but what I was good at was making people laugh and deciding who I wanted to talk to about Star Wars and That's Incredible, which were the two basic needs of my life at the time, and comic books and Atari video games. But I loved Camp Wrightwood. We had a counselor there named Don Rowe, and he was this hippie character with a big bushy mustache, and he was just the coolest cat I'd met up till then. I hadn't met Mr. Benton yet, so I didn't know what a real gentleman father figure was like. And Don Rowe was a pretty good 2-week surrogate, because camp in the summer was 2 weeks, camp at spring break was 1. I'd seen movies where kids went to camp for like a month, and I didn't understand, like, you get to, or not a month, 3 months, like these kids went to camp forever, and I never that's a thing. I wouldn't even know. Like, in Meatballs, where they go to camp, and like half of the summer camp, the parents show up for Parents' Day. It's also in the movie Poison Ivy with Michael J. Fox. Had no concept of that. You got on the bus at church, and you went to camp, and then a week later you got on the bus, and they took you back to church. That's how it worked. Summer camp was fantastic. I had such a good time. It's weird to think that at that age, I was probably 11 when I went, because it would have been prior to 7th grade. So going to camp and being able to be whoever you wanted, I decided I was, going to try to be cool with the ladies. Like me, of all people, me. And so I'm parked waiting for Josie, just like last episode. But I decided to do this thing. And they have a dance the Friday night before you leave camp, because you're there from Monday to Sunday. And that Friday they have a dance. And I actually danced with probably 20 young girls on that night. I had no shyness around them, because I didn't know them. And they didn't know me. And we were just young people. And, this is before puberty, before sex rears its ugly head. And you just get to be a kid. And I had such a good time. But you get to do arts and crafts. I was really good at arts and crafts. I was so good that they had they have multiple arts and crafts. The two I remember the most were they had this wax paper project. You put wax paper down on a heated surface, and then you drew with a crayon so that the crayon melted as you drew, and it would make these beautiful sort of fluid pictures. And I made a bunch of those. You wait for them to dry, then you roll them up and you could take them home. The other project was they had a whole area full of these little tiny boxes, and you could take the boxes and paint them however you wanted to make trinket boxes or whatever you wanted. So I took a whole stack of them and I made them into a robot. It had 2 boxes for the head, 4 or 5 boxes for the torso, then the arms went out, and you could put little people if I wanted to in the boxes to control. This is prior to Voltron, I think, but it's the same kind of thing. And it was such a cool thing, and I couldn't wait to get it home to add it to my Star Wars collection. But instead, when I got back to my cabin, some kid had stolen it. It wasn't there. And it turned out he wanted it so bad that he took it. And when I talked to the counselors there about what was going on, they just sort of shrugged and went, he doesn't have the talent to make it. And you can make another one. So why don't you let him have it? So I let him have it. I never made another one. I don't remember ever bringing one home, so I must have made just the one. Very strange. It was church camp, so there were Bible readings and there were sing-alongs. But since that was a regular part of my life anyways, I didn't think anything, I was okay. I was immersed in it. So we sang songs and had Bible readings and just had a really good time. The only bad thing that ever happened at that camp was there was a swimming day, and I decided to go swimming. And I remember slipping into the deep end and not being able to get back out of the water. I was underwater for a pretty long time. And I grabbed at one of the counselor's legs and, tugged on the poor guy's leg. And he grabbed me by the hair and pulled me out of the water. And he's like, "You okay, dude?" I'm like, well, I almost died, but I'm okay. And you just go back to your life. But I can remember it vividly. This must have happened in about 15 seconds of my life. And yet, I remember it pretty vividly. Pretty darn vividly. But that was Wrightwood in the summer, and it was so much fun. And leaving it was bad because summer at my house was not the most exciting time, because with the drunks there, every day was a minefield of we don't know what's going to happen. Is Charlie going to fall and break a hip? Is one of the guys going to get arrested? Will they have enough beer to last the day? We don't know. Will I be asked to help roll cigarettes? Maybe. Or will there be a poker game using the 10,000 beer caps that they kept in a box? Any number of things could have happened. But at camp, none of that happened. Now, my sister was lucky in her own way because Jennifer was always able to go to her father's house. He had custody on the weekends. And during the summer and spring break and such, she would just stay over there longer. Which meant that I would be home alone with these drunks with nobody by my side. And I know that Jennifer listens to this show. And there were times I would go and stay with her and her father just to get away from Roger Dole Rogers and the Tennessee Claw and Bip Bip Bidoweedo and all the crap that was going on at the house. So camp was my escape. Jennifer never went to camp. She didn't have to. She had another way out. But I think my mother got the church to pay for it. Now, the second time I went to Wrightwood was during spring break, and it was actually, it was still snowing. And you had to pack a whole different set of things for the snow. So my mother bought the cheapest, quote-unquote, snow boots she could find. And by day 2, the toes of them had frozen and cracked and disintegrated. So I spent the week with wet feet and having to air out my feet every night And the shoes, there was nothing to do. There was no, you'd think that they have duct tape, but they didn't duct tape the shoes. I can remember very clearly every night sitting there with wet feet from walking in the freaking snow all day. I had Don Rowe again. I specifically asked for his cabin. There was rooms in the lodge at Wrightwood, and then there were satellite cabins. And second years got to pick a cabin because the cabins were cooler. They were cooler to be in the cabin. What we decided in the cabin was that we got a cabin that had a refrigerator. So we decided we were going to fill it with food. So every time we'd go to the mess hall to eat, we would bring stuff back and put it in the fridge, and then we would snack all night when you're not supposed to snack. We eventually got into massive trouble for this. Probably day 3 or 4, we got in massive trouble, and we had to do what's called FOB. If you've ever went to camp, you might know what FOB is. But FOB was part of your daily life at camp. After lunch and before craft time, you had about 35 to 40 minutes of FOB. Now, because we had stolen from the cafeteria, we had probably 2 or 3 hours of FOB. What's FOB, you ask? That is time spent flat on back. And that means in your cabin, on your bunk, doing nothing. And remember, again, there's no video games, there's no internet. You might have, smuggled in a comic book, but you weren't supposed to bring any of that. You could bring a Bible. Now, I've never been a Bible reader, so I don't remember sitting at camp and reading a Bible. The Bible was read to me, but I never sat and read a Bible at camp. But I can remember laying there and we're all laughing at our extra time of FOB because we had stolen food. And we decided it was worth it because we were the coolest cabin there. We had plenty of food when, if you didn't get enough to eat at chow time, you could go back to our cabin and snack all day. It was great. It was a really good time. The other part of camp that was pretty cool was probably Saturday night of camp. They had a talent show, and people would sing, and they would tap dance, or they would do something, juggle, whatever it was. And I got to do, the first time I went there, I did a magic show. I was Tucker the Magnificent with my magic kit, and I did all of my Adam's magic tricks, to the amazement of the people in the audience. And then the second time I went to camp at Wrightwood for the talent show, I did a puppet show, because I had some pretty good puppets. And I've always really ask my kids. I buy puppets all the time. I have a very weird need to buy puppets because I don't like to see puppets lying around not full of life. So I buy them and I give them life because I'm a weird person. But I did a puppet show, and what a crazy time. I remember getting injured a couple of times at camp. One time I cut my arm pretty bad, and they had to bandage it. And the second time, I had something wrong with my eye, and I had to wear an eye patch for a day. Like, that'll get you, girls. What's wrong with your eye? Well, funny you should ask, sweetheart. Not that I was any kind of ladies' man, and not that these people were going to keep in contact with me after camp. I never saw any of these people again. The only person I ever saw again was Don Rowe, because we found out that Don Rowe was stationed at the Anaheim Methodist Church, and there was a day of some sort of activity, and I actually got to go back a couple years later and hang out with Don, and, he really meant a lot to me. It was just 2 camps, but he was a cool guy. He was the guy that was encouraging us to steal food. He was a pretty cool dude. So, the only other time I went to camp, I loved Lazy W, but I really enjoyed Wrightwood. I still have a photo from Wrightwood Camp of all the campers there and hanging out. But the other time we went to camp, the other time I was involved with camp was Vacation Bible School. Josie's here giving me the stink eye. If she was wearing her glasses, she would know it was me, but she doesn't wear her glasses.
I forget them once.
Okay. I'm doing a show, but I'm not going to make you be part of it. I'm going to finish up here and then...
What's it about?
Record about camp.
Oh, yeah, no.
Because you've never been to camp.
No.
So I went to Vacation Bible Camp because this was when Jennifer and I were quite young. I must have been, I want to say 9, which would have made Jennifer 6. But we went to Catholic Bible Camp. And this is where a bus picked you up in the morning and kept you all day at camp. And I will tell you all about Catholic Bible Camp. Oh, it's so exciting. After I drop Josie off and finish this episode. So, in between divorcing Jennifer's father and hooking up with the drunks, my mother needed places to stick us during the summer. She couldn't afford the babysitter she had been paying before. We were staying with a family called the Perkins that my mother had found that was near our elementary school. So we would stay with them. And then there was... this is so funny to be remembering all this. There was a woman named Inez. I mean, isn't that she was ancient when we met her, this woman, Inez. And she would watch us sometimes. And then there was also people who lived across the street but were part of my mother's Eastern Star Club named Coy and Gill. And they would watch us. They were funny because they lived in this house that was small but was mostly one room. So there was a big living room and then little tiny rooms. And they would treat us to McDonald's, but they didn't understand that we were weird kids and only ate things plain. So the biggest memory I have, and this is like really early memory, is Coy and Gill scraping off everything off of a McDonald's hamburger and me deciding I have to eat this or there's no food and I will enjoy it. Now I eat them with everything except pickles, but the taste of that is still Coy and Gill. And then Inez had a heart attack while she was driving and drove her car off the freeway. And I remember that was the first funeral I remember going to and the viewing of her body. I mean, this is, what am I, 8? Jennifer's 5. And I remember it vividly, seeing the body in the coffin, and her eyelids had been wired shut. You could actually see the wire. And I remember asking my mother, and they're like, well, you need to keep her eyes closed. But that was the first death I can remember. But, boy, that got dark quick, didn't it? But this Catholic Bible school that my mother sent us to, this rickety old bus would pick us up and then pick up like 20 other kids. It would take an hour just to go a few blocks down the street, and it was in the same town, but the bus would just drive round and round and round to pick up all these kids. But they had a vested interest because they were providing a service, a free vacation Bible school for the children, but also there was a little bit of indoctrination going on. Even though we weren't Catholic, we were being immersed in Catholicism for that week or 2 weeks, or however long it lasted. And I just remember these were miserable days. Misery. No toys, no Star Wars figures, no TV. Instead, it was you sat in a classroom and were taught Bible lessons by the nuns at the Catholic Church, the people of the Catholic Church. Then occasionally, and this was at a church that also had full service classrooms. You know, our church, the church I went to, was relatively small. It had a nice main area, a small narthex to walk into, a choir room, an office for the minister, and that was pretty much it. Then it had a separate building where they had social functions. But this Catholic place was like a maze with classrooms and a large, ornate worship area, and then grounds, and then other auxiliary buildings. And we would be sat down in this classroom and preached to for 2 solid hours, and then march down to the church itself to sing songs with everybody. And we would sing This is where my sister's probably going to start crying, because who knows if she even remembers this. That's how long ago it was. We would sing, "Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before." And the Catholics, unlike the Methodists, would sing all 4 or 10 verses of these songs. So this singing would take an hour. Like, imagine an hour of gospel, biblical music. Then you'd mercifully be let out for a recess. And I remember that going out for recess the first day, and they had cookies and lemonade. And like, oh, perfect. This will take the edge off. And drinking it going, what is wrong with this lemonade? Oh, we sweeten it with honey. We don't like sugar here. So the cookies are sugar-free, and the lemonade is sugar-free. And I'm like, oh, just kill me now. Oh, kill me. And it was like, and then seeing Jennifer, my sister, out in the playground area was like when Red and Andy Dufresne meet up in Shawshank, like they've been released from their cell for 10 minutes. Like, we got to play quick because they're gonna drag us back in, and they would drag us back in till 3 or 4 o'clock for more biblical lessons, more songs, and then maybe an art and craft thing. But it was, again, always biblically related. Everything was about the Bible, and I know now why my mother had to do it. She needed a place to stash us because she had nobody to watch us. This is probably right before the drunks moved in. There's this tiny couple of summers where we were left to our own devices. So this was, my mother has to have somebody watching us. We cannot be left home alone. There's nobody to pay. My brother's girlfriend, Donna, was not equipped to watch children. The Perkins, nice people, but I know they charge my mother like $20 or $30 a week, which is a lot of money back then. This was free, and she took advantage of it, and we ended up bathing in the Holy Spirit at the Catholic Vacation Bible School. Oy vey. That's my camp memories. I did like going to camp. They were escapes. The Catholic one wasn't. But the actual stayover camps were very essential to figuring out, what kind of person are you going to be? Who are you going to interact with, and what kind of kids do you like, and going on hikes and swimming and arts and crafts, and just having no worries. As an adult, we don't have that. We never have that. Even on vacation, I'm watching the money that we spend. You ever play The Sims, and every time they go to the refrigerator, money signs float off their heads as they're eating? That's how I look at my kids. Every time they pull out their cell phone or eat something out of the refrigerator, ching, ching, there it goes. And you have to be conscious of that. You don't have that as a kid. And that's why I think the camp experiences were so pure, because it was just about A, escaping, and B, the opposite of escaping, which is finding yourself. They were important. And I experienced all of that walking around Camp Josepho. I was there for 2 full days, and they were really interesting experiences. On the second day, the job that I had been doing, part of it, they set up Wi-Fi. And if you've never seen an actual Wi-Fi setup, it was fascinating. It's a big cable. It comes out of a van, and they loop the cable around the area that you're in. So it's like half a mile. I mean, a quarter mile one way, loop back, quarter mile back where you came. So it's a half a mile of cable, and they juice it up, and they give you the password, and suddenly your phone works a little. Because it's just Wi-Fi, you can't make any cell calls. There's no cellular tower to relay the call, but you can, and you can't text because texting goes through cell towers. But I was able to use Facebook to talk to Rachel a little bit. And actually, you could make a phone call on Facebook. Has your Facebook ever rang on your phone? You're like, it goes, you're like, what the hell is that? You're getting a Facebook call? I was able to, talking to Rachel on Facebook was like using the Ark of the Covenant to talk to God. It was in and out, and a little bit frightening. So, on the second day, there was a lot to do with this project, and at one point, I was done. I could have stayed longer, but they were like, "There's a bus leaving right now," and I'm like, "Let's go," because this was a lot like living in Riverside, where I knew I had to go to work, so I would look at the clock, and I was like a time traveler living 40 minutes from now. So I knew that if I left Riverside and I could gauge the traffic, I could arrive at work in 40 minutes. So if I'm at home at 10, it's 10:40 right now, because I'm going to lose that 40 minutes in its entirety just driving to work. Camp Josepho was the same way, because I got in the van and I'm like, okay, I have to zone out for an hour before we even reach civilization. And then it's another trek from the Pacific Palisades to the drop-off point. And you sit there on the bus in the darkness. There's no street lights. The road up was pitch black. And I know that off one side, it's a sheer drop. So you try not to think about it. You try not to think about the situation that you're in, because if you concentrate on it and think about it, you'll go mad, because the danger is real, But I just looked at the guy and I'm like, this is a professional driver. He's probably done this a million times. Even if he's just doing the project we've done, he must have done this trip at least 6 times, because there were vans coming and going all day. So I will just sit here. And then about the 40-minute mark, the whole van comes alive, because everybody's phone suddenly enters the service area, and you start pinging, ping, bing, 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 really crazy. We get up to the top, everybody leaves, and I'm waiting for Rachel to pick me up. So I just talked to the driver for a couple minutes, and I was like, that is quite a harrowing drive. I am glad you're a professional. And he's like, yeah, I've been working doing this thing. I was like, thank goodness. He says, yeah, but, I came down to base camp, and they never had me drive back up. I said, I'm sorry, what? They never what? He goes, yeah, that time going up in the dark, it's my first time. Did great, though. And I'm like, did great? You either do great or we're all dead. If that van rolls, it's not going to stop till it hits the bottom at Camp Josepho, and we're all dead. And we earn our merit badge in dying. So I had a really interesting time doing this project, being at a summer camp that's purely for summer camp, not used for anything else. Because I know Camp Wrightwood was used for other things. Lazy W they're primarily a summer camp or a spring camp, but I'm sure they have retreats there and stuff. This Camp Josepho is so isolated that it's purely camp, and then this project must be one of the rarities that they were like, we'll allow this project to inhabit the place for like 2 days or 3 days or whatever, because I'm sure there was prep time. This was a lot longer than that, because they had been there long before us setting stuff up. But walking through that big hall and seeing plaques on the walls and photos of old campers and counselors, and then where we were eating in the what would have been the counselor or leaders dining room, they had photos of all the scout leaders dating way back when, so you could gauge like fashions and trends. And seeing all these people, you get a profound sense of history and the part that you play in it, and the part that history plays in you. And without a phone, without anything to distract your mind, you really have a lot of thoughts there. And I did a lot of thinking, staring off into the wilderness of Camp Josepho. I'm proud of the work that I did there. Eventually, I'll be able to talk about it once it's for public consumption, and that's not being coy. There are some photos that are out from it, because it was a thing that people did report on, but I'm waiting for the final cap on it. And when that does come out, I'll mention this. Oh, that's the Camp Josepho thing. You'll go, oh, okay, I get it. But It was a good time. It was very well run, very professional. And the only weird part was that descent into madness. You felt a little like Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now going, upriver to see Marlon Brando. Only when I got upriver, the only crazy person I found was myself. Well, campers, that's about it. This has been an interesting episode. I drove in the car. Now I'm sitting at home, finishing up. I hope you enjoyed this episode. The episodes are getting weird, aren't they? Not that we've run out of things to say, but I have some fun episodes planned in the coming future. So, hey, thanks for sticking around. Hope you enjoy the show. Yada, yada, yada. I'm Jeff Tucker. You heard me and Josie. You heard Josie for a very short time. I want to thank everybody who supports this show on Patreon, everybody who posts on the Facebook page. It's so gratifying to talk to people who actually listen to the show. I'm humbled by your interest in this. It's really been a fun journey. We're coming up on year 6 of this show that we call 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
Hey, this is Jeff real quick. If you're a fan of the show, you know that I love to talk about Wally George. I was on his television show, The Hot Seat. I did a whole episode. I think I did 2 episodes because did I put the audio up? I don't remember. But you can check it out on YouTube. But I have a friend. His name is Danny, and he's running a website right now. It's www.wallyvhs.com, wallyvhs.com. And he's trying to put together a collection of Wally George episodes because I guess he talked to the people at KDOC, Channel 56, and they recorded over the masters of Wally's show. So the original masters of Hot Seat do not exist. So if you managed to tape one back in the day, Hot Seat Hotline, if you have any of that footage, go to wallyvhs.com and you can contact him about digitizing it and putting it in part of the collective so that there's a nice place where people can go and look up all of the great shows that Wally did back in the day. Awesome. Thank you.
Good night, future boy.